The arena was built for spectacle. Floodlights carved hard shapes across the stage, cameras hummed on their cranes, and 1,000 phones glowed like scattered stars. It smelled of popcorn, hot dust from the lights, and too much cologne. Nobody had come for a real fight. They had come for a show, a staged charity exhibition with more microphones than sweat. At the center stood Dwayne Johnson. He didn't need notes. He had timing, rhythm, and the kind of smile that could summon applause on command. He leaned into the microphone, let the silence ripen, and then dropped his line like a hammer. The Rock looked straight into the camera and called Chuck Norris a museum piece, a relic, a fighter that belonged in the past. The words cut clean. For half a beat, the audience hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Then laughter rolled through the lower bowl, spreading row by row. People slapped each other's backs, repeated museum piece, as though it were the night's best punchline. A chant broke out from one corner. Rocky, Rocky, and grew until it shook the rafters. On the big screens, producers fed crowd shots. A boy with a toy belt, a couple holding a sign that read "Legends Never Die," a podcaster pointing at his phone like this moment had been made for him. The show had its hook, and Johnson basked in it. He paced slowly, flexing his hands as if they were already taped, rolling his shoulders like a man loosening for something bigger. "Nothing but respect," he said, pretending humility while sharpening the blade. "Those movies were great. Big kicks, big hair, great times. But that was then. This is now. Let's not pretend antiques can keep up with the world as it is." Laughter again, harsher this time. A handful of older veterans in row 6 didn't move. They folded their arms. One of them muttered under his breath, and the camera didn't catch it. The host in a tuxedo tried to smooth things. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is a celebration," but The Rock wasn't finished. "You know what museums have?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. "Ropes, to make sure nobody hurts themselves touching the exhibits." That laugh had edges. It landed with the sting of mockery. Phones were already uploading clips, captions typed before the sentence finished. #museum piece trended within minutes. And then something shifted. The laughter collapsed into a pocket of silence. People turned toward the far tunnel, where security had opened a lane. A murmur spread, uneven at first, then rising. "Is he here? No way. That can't be him." The cameras swung automatically, lenses hunting the shadow moving into the light. No entourage, no fanfare, just one man walking at his own pace. Chuck Norris appeared in plain clothes, dark jeans, a jacket, nothing styled for television. No music, no theatrics. He looked like someone who had come by mistake, except the crowd felt the ground change under them. He walked straight, posture clean, eyes forward. At 70+, he carried the years not as a burden but as a ledger. The lights caught the lines on his face and turned them into something carved, not fragile. He stepped onto the stage without acknowledging the tape marks meant for blocking. The cameras closed in. His hands were loose at his sides. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Just stood, steady, under the brightest light. The Rock spread his arms like a showman presenting an exhibit. "Ladies and gentlemen, the past." It was meant as a punchline, but no one laughed. The silence was heavy enough to hear a seat creak as someone shifted. A vendor on the concourse froze mid-transaction, staring down the tunnel. The production clock in the booth flashed red, urging the director to cut to commercial, but she didn't press the button. Chuck took one step forward. Just one. The movement was small, but the room tilted with it. Every lens tightened. The chant of "Rocky" sputtered and died. Another voice, high, raw, shouted "Chuck" from the lower bowl before being swallowed by anticipation. The Rock started to say something easy to defuse the tension, but stopped. Years of working stadiums had taught him that the next sound might belong to the wrong man. Chuck didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence pressed harder than any insult. The crowd leaned in, sensing something irreversible had begun. The host, sweating now, tried again. "For our special demonstration." His voice was too bright, too fast. Nobody cared. The cameras knew better. They held Norris's face, carved by light, unblinking. And in that unspoken stare, the spectacle stopped being a joke. "Just wondering, where are you watching from?" "Write it down, Bello." The show had been designed for noise, but silence kept sneaking in around the edges. Chuck Norris stood on the mat as if it were just another floor, his jacket folded neatly on a chair. No spotlight tricks, no bravado. Jeans, long sleeves, a man in his 70s carrying himself without apology. It unsettled people more than if he had shouted back. The Rock played to the room like he always did. He rolled his shoulders, bounced lightly, made eye contact with fans in the front row. "Don't break a hip, old man," he called, and the arena erupted in laughter. It wasn't cruel so much as automatic. People relieved to laugh instead of reckon with the possibility that the legend across from him might not be finished after all. Half the crowd jeered Chuck, the other half roared his name. On social feeds, the split looked even sharper. Clips of The Rock's grin, comments mocking Norris's age, and then counterpunches, grainy old fight reels, strangers insisting that silence itself was intimidation. Hashtag 1-minute challenge burned its way into the trending bar before the referee had even raised a hand. Norris gave them nothing. No grin, no dismissive shrug. He set his feet the way someone sets a ladder against a wall, tested, exact. Fighters watching from the sidelines noticed the economy in his movements. Shoulders loose, hips squared, the weight placement of a man who hadn't forgotten what to do. On the Jumbotron, that stillness looked like calm. Up close, it was the quiet coil before something else. The Rock leaned in to keep the spotlight on himself. He shadowed a hook, exaggerated a hip twist, let his bicep pop under the lights. The crowd rewarded him with whoops. "One round," he said, loud enough to echo. "We'll give the legend a soft landing." His confidence was thick, but he could feel how the room's mood was less certain than his voice suggested. A veteran in the fifth row lowered his phone mid-recording and folded his arms. Beside him, a woman in a faded Walker, Texas Ranger hoodie clutched her hands like she was waiting for a verdict. In the mezzanine, a college kid who'd come to laugh realized his throat was dry. The air inside the arena felt charged, like before a storm. Stagehands rolled out the taped mat under the rig lights. A commission rep in a polo shirt stepped forward with the clipboard, looking more like a school principal than an official. "Demonstration only," he said firmly. "Light contact. No headshots. I say stop, you stop." Johnson nodded, easy grin in place. Norris just dipped his chin once. It was enough. The Rock used the pause to keep showboating. "Just warming up," he shouted. "Don't want to hurt the exhibit." He winked at a camera, milking the last laugh he could get. Chuck stripped off his jacket, folded it carefully, and rubbed his palms together once. The mic caught the faint rasp of calloused skin. That single, unplanned sound rolled into the hush that had started creeping down from the rafters. Security took positions at the edge of the mat. A cameraman crouched low, hunting for the angle that would turn the first exchange into a highlight. On the scoreboard, a timer graphic flashed awake. 1-minute demo. Beneath it, names in block letters. The Rock versus Norris. The font screamed brand. Chuck looked like the only thing in the building not branded. The Rock slid into a loose boxing stance, bouncing, fists up high. It was fluent enough for the casual eye, but rehearsed. He kept talking because silence didn't suit him. "You sure about this? I don't want the internet blaming me for ending your retirement plan." Laughter again, thin this time. Chuck raised his hands 2 inches, elbows tucked, chin neither lifted nor dropped. An old-school guard, unflashy, brutally efficient. His face betrayed nothing, but the way he scanned the space, the tape lines, the edges, even the lip of a speaker, showed calculation. He looked not at Johnson, but at the floor they shared, as if measuring it for use. The referee raised his arm. 1 minute, he called. No more, no less. The arena shivered with anticipation. Noise swelled, then dipped as the crowd realized how badly they wanted to hear the first contact. Phones steadied. Children stood on chairs. People leaned in as though their leaning could close the distance. "Last chance to back out," Johnson said. Grin stretched wide. "Gift shops that way." He pointed toward the tunnel. The crowd laughed uneasily. Norris didn't move, didn't answer. His stillness itself was answer enough. The absence of reaction was sharper than any line could have been. The referee cut the air with his palm. The timer glowed, 00:60, and began to count down. A murmur rolled through the stands, quickly drowned by silence. The kind of silence that has weight, like pressure against the chest. For a second nothing happened. Just 2 men standing. Johnson bounced lightly, selling confidence. Norris let out one long breath through his nose, body loose, eyes soft, The kind of exhale that belongs to someone who has rehearsed it 10,000 times alone. The minute hadn't truly started, but the tilt of the arena had. Everyone felt it. The balance had shifted before the first strike was even thrown. The scoreboard beeped, timer flashing 0:59. The Rock wasted no time. He lunged forward with a jab meant more for the cameras than for contact, sharp and fast. It never touched. Chuck tilted his shoulder and shifted half a step, letting the glove slice through empty air. The movement was so small it felt like time had skipped a frame. The crowd gave the sound that comes after a clean miss, half laughter, half unease. On the Jumbotron, Chuck looked almost motionless, arms barely lifted. But ringside, fighters saw the truth. Weight balanced, hips loose, posture of someone who still remembered the math of distance. The Rock expanded, selling the show. A low kick slapped the mat, a wide hook cut the lights. He played for noise, and the noise came. "Move him," someone shouted. He obliged, circling left, claiming the center. Chuck erased the angle with a quiet turn of his hips, a subtraction no camera could frame. A boxing coach in row 3 smiled knowingly. He'd seen that kind of precision before, in gyms that smelled of bleach and rubber, not under LED rigs. 52 seconds. The Rock attacked with flash, a jab, another jab, then an overhand swung hard enough to draw a roar. Chuck's head slipped aside by the width of a postcard. On the replay, it would look unreal. Live, it felt inevitable. Johnson brushed shoulders with him, a message. The ref barked, "Keep it clean." But Chuck didn't blink. He retreated to the edge of the tape, as if testing its grain. The Rock's grin stayed wide, but his breath had a sound now. He shifted stances, tried a back fist for theater. Chuck wasn't there. He was already past the line of attack, balanced, patient, unreadable. Silence spread from the veterans first, coaches leaning forward, elbows on knees. The rest of the arena followed, laughter cooling into something closer to reverence. 41 seconds. Johnson pressed harder. He stomped a teep that would have shoved most men backward. Chuck's front foot slid 1 inch. The strike tapped fabric, not flesh. The quiet of a miss rolled through the room like a draft. The Rock reset, threw a hard hook, the first strike with real malice. Chuck didn't block, didn't flinch. He touched the forearm with a guiding palm, rerouting it into nothing. Gasps scattered through the stands. The ref lifted his hand to warn, then lowered it, recognizing there was nothing dirty, only truth. 34 seconds. The Rock tried again, head high, selling a low feint into another wide arc. This time Chuck answered, not with a strike that cameras could glorify, but with a short, vertical fist punch, no wind-up, no drama. For inches of movement into the soft space below the sternum. It made a dull sound, cloth against cloth, almost private. But its effect was public. The Rock froze. Just for a second, but the glitch showed. Pupils widened, breath stuttered, shoulders stiffened. It wasn't knockout power. It was worse. The reminder that control doesn't need spectacle. Ringside veterans recognized it instantly. They nodded, silent. The rest of the crowd hesitated, then exploded in disbelief. Some screamed, others covered their mouths. Phones shook in hands, trying to capture what eyes barely caught. The Rock stepped back without meaning to, then forced himself forward again. His smile returned, not stage grin, but thin acknowledgement of pain. He jabbed once, more for order than effect. Chuck had already slid half a square to the blind side. Weight settled, gaze calm. The camera missed it. The audience felt it. 28 seconds. Dana White leaned forward, lips dry, suddenly less certain of the narrative. The ref moved closer, murmuring easy, though no one was sure if he meant it for Johnson or for fate itself. Chuck stood still, letting silence work. And silence worked harder than any punch. It grew until the whole arena leaned in, waiting for what would follow. 19 seconds. Johnson shook his shoulders loose, trying to disguise fatigue as swagger. His chest rose heavy, exhaled sharper. "Okay," he muttered, caught by a mic. It wasn't surrender. It was honesty, an admission that he'd felt something he hadn't expected. Chuck gave no reply. His eyes stayed pale, his body loose, as though time itself belonged to him. The clock burned down, digits bleeding red. The crowd held its breath. They weren't sure whether to cheer or pray. And in that hush, a new question formed. Not whether The Rock could beat Chuck Norris, But how many seconds remained before the room saw something it would never forget? The sound in the arena didn't rise so much as detonate. One moment a held breath, the next a wall of noise that shook metal. The first clean shot from Chuck, small, almost private, rippled outward and turned the room into weather. The Rock absorbed it with a grin that tried to be bigger than the evidence. He tapped his own chest twice, pantomimed good one, and wagged a finger as if scolding a nephew. From the upper bowl, it looked like confidence. Ringside, where pupils widened before faces do, the first seam of doubt flashed and was gone. He answered with pressure, not the practiced rhythm of a camp, but the blunt insistence of a man used to owning rooms. He crowded Norris with shoulder and forearm, walking him toward the taped edge, then snapped his arms around a body lock, hips in, chin tucked, picture perfect for the cameras. The crowd loved the image, muscle swallowing quiet. He lifted hard, gritting, a public display in 3 beats. I can pick him up. I can put him wherever I want. I am gravity. Chuck didn't fight the lift. He let his feet leave the mat a finger's width, enough to feed the illusion, enough to sell the shot. His hands didn't paw or pummel. They sought points. Forearm bone against bicep. Palm at triceps head. A small circle drawn by the heel of one hand along the seam of the Rock's grip. His hips turned not away but into the hold-the-way doors swing when you push on hinges, not on wood. The camera cranes overshot. They were looking for violence and missed a hinge. The Rock adjusted, breath loud now. Come on, he muttered. At Chuck, at the crowd, at the idea this would be easy. He hauled up again and, with the theatrical instinct that made him famous, exaggerated the lift, elbows out, back arched, so the upper decks could read the picture. Norris wrote a different caption. He dropped his center an inch as if the mat had softened, posted one forearm across the Rock's collarbone, and made a quarter turn that changed all the math. Hips flashed past hips. One of the Rock's feet slid, searching purchase. His hands lost each other and found air. In the time it took a camera to refocus, the hold came unknotted and a man who had intended to plant another man on the floor found himself on his own knees, palms splayed. The canvas suddenly too far away to disguise what had happened. Silence. Not universal. No arena grants that, but the kind that sucks sound into itself. A single whoop from the cheap seats popped like a soap bubble and vanished. Then the shock processed, and the place exploded again, louder than before, voices cracking under the strain of disbelief. People who had come to heckle stood by instinct, not etiquette. The ref slid nearer, palms open, eyes asking questions he didn't voice. Chuck stepped back a half pace, hands visible, breath even. He didn't look triumphant. He looked like a man who had put a box back on the correct shelf. The Rock rose fast, faster than his breath could follow. Blood colored his cheeks high and angry. He shook his arms out, bounced on the balls of his feet, tried to reset the narrative with motion. The camera found his eyes before the grin reattached. For a half-second they were too honest. Not fear, not yet, but the startled respect of a man who has mismeasured another's edges. He went mean with the clinch. Forehead to cheekbone. He ground for angle, then cinched a whizzer and drove Norris into the fence that wasn't there. Only a taped border and a reputation. He hooked a leg, tried to trip. Chuck allowed the pressure to land where pressure wants to land and moved the only thing that mattered, the fulcrum. A small step outside, the shin biting into calf. Not a sweep, not a trip, a suggestion. The Rock's knee bent to accommodate it and found itself obedient. Again, the crowd saw the result and not the lever that produced it. From the dais, Dana clapped once, too loud. That's what I'm talking about, he yelled to nobody. The mic on his lapel betrayed a crack in his voice that his smile could not cover. He looked to production for a cutaway. There wasn't one. The Rock tried to bully the geometry back into his favor. He stuffed his left hand into Norris's right shoulder and shoved on the brake. Open palms to keep it photogenic. Fingers splayed to show the audience he wasn't cheap. The shove staggered exactly no one. Chuck's feet had already replaced where his body would be. He drifted 2 inches, and the push landed where he wasn't. Keep it clean, the ref warned. Reflex more than reprimand. Chuck's face stayed untroubled. He gave the Rock nothing to push against but air. That refusal, of conflict on the wrong terms, was its own kind of punishment. The crowd felt it in their ribs. They closed again. The Rock snapped a short uppercut inside that traced a clean path until it didn't. Chuck rotated an elbow a thumb's width and let bone become shield. The strike glanced, found forearm, died. The return, if you could call it that, was a small off-balancing tug at the crook of an elbow and a press at the wrist that made Johnson's shoulders square at exactly the wrong moment. He stumbled a step and, furious at his own feat, lunged to reclaim space. Norris met him with a turn. Not a spin, not theater. A pivot on the ball of the foot that placed him where the Rock's arms could not be strong. The next second belonged to gravity again, but on Norris's terms. The Rock's knee touched canvas, one knee, one heartbeat, then came up as if denial could erase physics. The arena's sound had texture now. You could hear the believers, the doubters, the converts changing pews mid-sermon. Chuck, Chuck, caught in one section and ran sideways, colliding with Rocky, until both chants shredded into raw noise. A little boy on his father's shoulders covered his ears and grinned, because being frightened and thrilled at once is a child's favorite drug. The Rock broke range and walked in a tight circle, hands low, jaw working. He laughed, a harsh bark meant for microphones. "Okay," he shouted. "Okay." The laughter in reply didn't feel like his anymore. He cut a glance toward Dana that said, "Save me a line," but lines work poorly against demonstrations. He surged back into reclaimed tempo with a high collar tie, triceps bite, shoulder pressure. The clinch was textbook and therefore predictable. Chuck's hands found bony landmarks with a fluency no camera can sell. Thumb knuckle to mandibular notch. Gentle, legal, persuasive. Hips slipping to the open side. Knee angle closing like a hinge. The Rock structure softened at one critical joint and the rest followed orders. The canvas found him again, both knees this time. He popped up fast enough to pretend it hadn't happened. "You feel that?" a woman whispered to her husband, and didn't mean the air conditioning. The Rock's grin curdled. He fished for a new frame. Showman, comedian, bully. None fit. Rage found him. Relief in a different costume. He stepped to the ref, finger stabbing. "Hey," he started, and what he meant was "make this mine again." The ref lifted both hands and shook his head once. The universal sign for "do not talk to me now." It didn't matter. The Rock reached for the nearest microphone anyway, ripped it from the ref's chest like a magician stealing a tie, and turned to the crowd with a voice that could sell a summer blockbuster and had never before needed a friend. "This isn't real fighting," he roared, breath roughening the edges of the words. The sentence hit like a thrown chair. Boos poured from one end of the bowl. Cheers rose from the other. A third sound, shock, rolled under both. The veterans stood in a row like a shoreline. Dana's smile calcified. The director mouthed "stay wide" into her headset. Security leaned forward and then remembered their training and leaned back. Chuck's expression didn't break. He looked at the Rock the way a carpenter looks at a warped board. Not angry, not amused, just measuring the work left to do. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The room had heard the wrong plea at the wrong time from the wrong man. The ref retrieved his mic with a calm that read as bravery. "We continue," he said, more to the building than to the fighters. The Rock shoved the mic back, jaw clenched, eyes bright with the chemical cocktail of embarrassment and adrenaline. He rolled his shoulders like a man stepping back under a bar he'd just missed. Across from him, Norris lifted his hands the width of 2 fingers, nothing more, breathing through his nose, the still point in a storm he had not summoned but would not flee. The timer glowed above them, patient. The chants tore at each other until they were one sound. The air felt thinner. Somewhere a camera found Chuck's face and stayed, because stillness photographs better when everything else shakes. And with the crowd split into armies and the showman's mask slipping, the minute's second half waited. Hungry for a conclusion no one could script, and only one of them could deliver. The crowd split like a torn flag, one half chanting the Rock's name with desperate intensity, the other pounding Chuck's with a steady drumbeat. The noise wasn't just volume anymore. It was sides being chosen, identities staked in sound. Reporters leaned forward, scribbling lines they already knew would trend. Dana White sat rigid, his grin faltering, eyes darting from cameras to the cage as though willing control back into his grasp. The Rock tried to restore the narrative the only way he knew, by force. He circled wide, chest heaving, and clapped his gloves together hard enough to echo. Then he charged, throwing a barrage. Fists swung in wild arcs, a knee darted, an elbow grazed the air. But Chuck moved with minimal precision, A shoulder turn, a palm that redirected, a sidestep that reduced power to smoke. The Rock's aggression made noise, but no impact. A few in the crowd booed. Others laughed nervously. Many simply fell silent, realizing the showman's storm was landing on emptiness. Chuck never rushed. He let time breathe, his stance like a metronome ticking beneath chaos. Then it shifted. The Rock lunged, throwing a hook meant to end things. Chuck slipped an inch, palm glancing off the wrist, and with a tiny turn of his hips, he redirected momentum. Suddenly, the Rock was stumbling forward, one knee brushing the canvas before pride yanked him upright. The gasp from the arena spread like shockwave, an involuntary recognition that power was cracking. Humiliation burned hotter than fatigue. Red in the face, the Rock pressed forward again, but Chuck was waiting. A short, precise strike landed to the ribs. No wind-up, no theatrics. The sound was dull, but the effect instant. The Rock staggered back, breath punched out of him. The crowd erupted. Some screamed Chuck's name. Others tried to rally their hero, but doubt had already entered the noise. The camera caught Johnson's eyes, confidence gone, replaced with that sharp edge between anger and fear. He threw more punches, desperate, but each one fell into traps. Chuck brushed them aside, corrected angles, touched with precision. Every movement told a truth the cameras couldn't edit. Discipline eats chaos alive. Then came the moment that froze the arena. The Rock swung hard, his whole frame behind it. Chuck shifted, lowered his stance, and drove a compact fist into the solar plexus. Not a show strike. A mechanic's tool, short and exact. The Rock's body betrayed him, knees buckled, breath seized. He dropped to one knee as though pulled by invisible gravity. For a second, silence fell. Even cameras seemed to hesitate. Then came the eruption, screams, disbelief, chants colliding into a storm of sound. Some cheered, others shouted denial. But everyone knew they'd just seen something raw. The Rock forced himself up, shaking his head, face twisted between rage and shame. He tried to smile for the cameras, but the mask slipped. Sweat streamed, hands trembled. He stepped forward again, stubborn, unwilling to quit. Chuck didn't chase. He stepped calmly toward him, closing the distance with the patience of a man who already knew the ending. They locked in a clinch, the Rock pushing with all that was left, arms straining, jaw clenched. Chuck's hands found bone and leverage, guiding him into stillness. The power went nowhere. The camera zoomed tight, the Rock's breath shallow, his eyes flickering. Chuck leaned closer, his voice low enough to be meant only for him. Now it's real. The crowd couldn't hear the words, but they didn't need to. They felt the weight of them in their bones. The chants swelled again, drowning into one roar. Dana shook his head, already knowing the script had flipped. The Rock broke the clinch, raised his hands with stubborn defiance. But the fear was visible now, buried under anger. Chuck reset calmly, his guard a picture of old discipline. The clock ticked, the arena seethed, and everyone knew. The next exchange would decide everything. The last seconds of the round stretched like hours. Every eye in the arena locked onto the cage. Every breath synced with the clash of two men, one built on spectacle, the other on discipline. The Rock charged one final time, pride dragging his tired frame forward. His punches came heavy, wild, meant to end not just the fight but the doubt gnawing at him. Chuck absorbed the storm with stillness. His guard barely shifted. Each miss deepened the silence beneath the crowd's roar. Then he saw it. The overreach, the gap between intent and control. He stepped off the line, body rotating with surgical precision, and unleashed one last movement. A sweep of his leg, timed to the fraction of a heartbeat, cut the Rock's balance from under him. The giant toppled. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the clean geometry of inevitability. The Rock hit the mat, one arm catching himself, the other curled tight across his ribs. The crowd didn't cheer at first. They gasped, as though a monument had fallen. Chuck didn't follow up. No raised fists, no taunt. He stepped back, hands loose, expression unchanged. The ref moved, then froze, glancing at Johnson. The Rock's chest heaved, eyes glassy but unbroken. He tried to rise, but his body gave out, collapsing to his knees. The silence cracked into chaos. Some fans screamed it wasn't fair. Others roared Chuck's name. Phones shook in hands. Live streams blurred as people tried to capture what words could not. Dana White pressed both palms to his head, disbelief carved across his face. The script had dissolved under the weight of discipline older than the octagon. The Rock finally lifted his gaze. What met him wasn't ridicule, but Norris standing calm, eyes steady. Chuck extended a hand, not of conquest, but respect. The Rock stared, pride resisting, then slowly accepted. Their gloves gripped, held. The arena erupted again, but the sound had shifted. It wasn't about victory. It was acknowledgement. The Rock nodded, humbled. A mic appeared in Chuck's hand. He spoke with the calm that had broken his opponent. Respect is earned, not demanded. The words cut the noise. Cameras zoomed in, sweat glistened, eyes sharp. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He handed back the mic, turned, and walked away. Behind him, chants reignited, his name swelling, not as a meme, but as recognition of something real. The Rock stood hunched, exhausted, staring at the man vanishing into the tunnel. Strength without discipline had been exposed. The final image seared into every screen was contrast. The Rock humbled, Chuck leaving without looking back, silence louder than the crowd. Commentators finally spoke what everyone knew. The show meant to humiliate a relic had deepened a legend, and headlines carried the line that defined the night. The Rock called him a museum piece. Tonight, the museum taught the future.